David is going to finish us off today talking about New York, but kudos to him for putting this lineup together, and thanks for so many people for coming out. So David Kilpatrick.
Well, I think I win the award for most pretentious title here in Baltimore this week, I hope. Some of you may pick up on the allusion to Immanuel Kant. And what I have in mind here right now is just not to give a great history in any kind of depth. If anything, it's a provocation for myself or someone else to come along. The idea that if you're going to do a true history, just like Kant was concerned with any future metaphysics, what would a philosopher have to include in some kind of a metaphysics that could explain existence? If we were to explain New York soccer, I would first of all say it's got to include indoor. Hopefully I'll make that case in the next couple minutes. And whether it's myself or other historians to come to write that true history, I hope that what I include here and what I touch on briefly will be included. So I'll pick up right from where Tom had alluded to. This match at the Olympian rink. Oop, just lost the image. The match at the Olympian rink on the 2nd December of 1885, the match that Tom was talking about initially there, is generally recorded as the first, it's generally cited as the first recorded match of indoor soccer. That's not to say it's the first match of indoor soccer. I think anyone who's done any of this work finds that there's always another first before that first. A couple articles that I've written in the past about this topic have been outdated. Fortunately, the Cosmos website hasn't updated some of those things, but you can see some of the errors I've made in the past as digitization of newspapers is continually opening up new originals, new firsts all the time. But this match at the Olympian rink, a couple weeks after the match played in Newark, is the earliest recorded version of an indoor soccer match in New York City proper, and it was played at Broadway and 52nd Street. And this gives you an idea of that space. Again, some of the newer people may not remember the Roseland Ballroom, but this is on the same location where the Roseland Ballroom used to play. I imagine Leo spent a few late nights there. But that's the site of where it was. So if you can imagine right there in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, a really good sized crowd to see that. The report in the New York Times says it was New York versus Canadian Rovers. I don't know if that was really ONT versus Western FA of Ontario. Sometimes these match reports aren't so accurate. But the one detail that interests me the most, and again this is a nod to Dr. Jones some way, the referee was a guy named Harry Manley. He is, to me, the most important lost figure in the story of American soccer. He was the goalkeeper for the Riversides in the very first match played at Central Park, and he was the first president of the Southern New York State Association, which of course was the predecessor to our current United States Soccer Federation. If anybody belongs in the Hall in Frisco, it's Harry Manley, and he officiated this match. As it says here, he was most impartial and gave great satisfaction, which is not something we can say about everybody that PRO puts out necessarily. He's someone we should remember. As you can see, Manley, as I said, he played for the Riversides the first match in Central Park. He played in a match for Continental against the team that he had been playing for. They played a series of matches late 1885 through the spring of 1886. They were playing some matches outdoors, but they were getting good crowds in Midtown. Sometimes as much as 1,000 people would show up. As you can see, the kickoff on a Monday night, 9:15 at night. So again, the idea of New Yorkers coming out at 9:15 on a Monday night to see an indoor soccer match. Could we get 1,000 people out to a match in Midtown now on a Monday night? I don't know. But again, you can see here on a Wednesday night in April, they had upward of 1,000 spectators present to see Continental and Riverside. They had a little bit of a Groundhog League thing going on there, it seems, at the Olympian rink. Some of you have heard me talk a lot about the original Cosmos from the early 1890s. The Cosmopolitan Association Football Club were dubbed the Cosmos because it was fit in a little bit easier. They were the original Cosmos, and they played a lot of indoor games as well. Harry Manley played goalkeeper for the Cosmos quite frequently. He did not play in this match. This was at the 22nd Regiment Armory, which was down on West 14th. I had erroneously identified that as the Washington Avenue Armory before. I've since figured out that it's not. It was very posh to belong to this National Guard unit down in West 14th. I think there are some interesting links between Freemasons and some of the members of these clubs, but the Cosmos played this match against Corinthians. Again, a number of these people were involved in a different club scene that was really moving towards that first professional league. Who are familiar with the second iteration of the American Soccer League, Erno Schwartz founds the New York Americans, who thrived for decades, really. Brooke Hatton, another powerhouse New York City team, they did an exhibition match at the New York Coliseum, which is now a Department of Transport. I think they store the sand for the winter there now. And two sides of that building are still present. But they played an indoor match there, a score of 14-8. And you can see they played 6 players each in that match, 14-8. What other rules they modified for that? Hopefully we'll find out some way. But it looks like Schwartz had himself a hat trick that day. Madison Square Garden has for a long, long time been the centerpiece for entertainment, whether it's eventually rock and roll, it's world's most famous arena, and it was the world's most famous arena in 1941. I'd like to say that was a lot due to John Reed Kilpatrick, who ran the Garden from 1935 till his death in 1960. He did spend a nice day with my father there in the 1950s before he passed away. But this is really where the Garden became the world's most famous arena. And kind of cracking that idea of playing at the Garden is a really important one. Now, I think you found some information about an interesting soccer game played much before that. So again, there's a lot of information to be dug out from different newspapers of these exhibitions that were played at the Garden. But again, you can see a triple header was played. Brooke Hatton, Brooklyn Hispanos, St. Mary Celtics, some clubs that are familiar to many of you. A few weeks later, they returned to the Garden. Kilpatrick clearly was dissatisfied with the match action on the surface, and so they shifted to a different type of surface here. It says in this paragraph, indoor soccer differs from the outdoor game that the pitch is only 230 feet long and 110 feet wide. The goals are 7 feet high and 12 feet wide. So again, at the Garden, again, under Kilpatrick's leadership, I think they were trying to find the right solution, but things didn't really quite come together. Although there was talk of shifting, again, Steve, you talked about this a little bit, the idea of going from exhibitions to a more league format. May 1941, events happened later in the year that maybe conspired to keep that from ever happening. 1964, we see little more frequent tournaments, and some of you in this room may have been involved in these, right? 1964, the Eastern Indoor Soccer Tournament at the 71st Regiment, 34th and Park. Again, think about playing at that incredible location of 34th and Park. The teams Blue Star, Eintracht. Where's Tom? Yes, Joe?
I'm looking at that article, the last one you were just about to get to. I was in that building when it caught fire. I was playing for the Ukrainians in that armory in that day. That was a very scary time because we were hearing the alarms, but the game was being kept going, and nobody wanted to stop playing. Eventually, we had to evacuate the whole thing. You see the Ukrainians played there. I played in that game.
Well, 3-2. Yeah. Another thing I'd like to point out in the middle paragraph on this report from February 1964, Siggy Stritzel scored. Those of us that are Cosmos fans of a certain age have a soft spot for Siggy Stritzel. Siggy Stritzel Award would be given to the best New York City high school player. He's quite a legend for those of us that really love the club and its heritage. Indoor soccer is played with 6 men on a side instead of the regulation 11. So again, players that start to come through those ranks and eventually appear in the NASL are featuring in those. And again, Dr. Joe participated in that. 1971, you can see the German American Soccer League had their regular annual tournament up in Westchester County Center in White Plains. That building still exists. I'm a faculty member at Mercy College. That's where we have our commencement ceremonies. Would love to see indoor soccer come back there. From a Cosmos perspective, that day was really important. As you can see, Hota participated in that tournament, playing for Hota and also coaching Hota. Anybody want to say who that would have been? Gordon Bradley. That's right, Gordon Bradley was coaching that. Clive Toy was also there that day, and he saw a particular Brazilian goal scorer that he had to sign. The very first Cosmos signing was George Diego, who scored a few goals that day. So again, the transition between what was going on in these indoor games, talent identification and cultivation, again, a really important piece to the New York history puzzle. The Big Bang, as we like to talk about in terms of, it was CSKA Moscow, right? Was it CSKA or
Sparta came with the MISL tour.
Yeah.
I thought it was the Red Army, but maybe it might be CSKA
Well,
Moscow.
I think we called Cisco Red Army to make it even more dynamic, right? I think it was Cisco Moscow, associated with the Army team. But a few weeks later, I think the CSKA game at the Spectrum drew a little over 11,000. The Cosmos are brought in to just see how this could go, and they brought in about 6,500. So again, this isn't a game in New York, but a team representing New York. Again, shades of 1892 and 93, when the original Cosmos were playing the Philadelphia All-Stars, and that got the first ball rolling towards professionalization. Now again, the New York Arrows, the ultimate dynasty. When you think about indoor soccer in New York, of course you think about the Arrows. Playing primarily at Nassau Coliseum, but as Dr. Joe mentioned, the All-Star game in 1981, which he refereed, was played at Madison Square Garden, the current iteration of Madison Square Garden. And the Arrows played, I think it was 3 home games in the 1981 season. As you see here, the Western squad beat the East by a score of 8-5. And there's Steve Zungel. I don't think we've mentioned Steve Zungel. No. He scored a hat trick in that first game at Nassau Coliseum. One of many. And then as you can see, next week, the Arrows played their first competitive match there in the Garden. But again, that didn't last. By the time the Cosmos returned to playing indoor soccer in the 1983-84 season, again, the Cosmos, many players weren't, Fernandinho left the room, but when the Cosmos played their first season of indoor soccer, 1981-82, it gave a lot of opportunities for Americans who were on the roster, who weren't getting as much time in the NASL. But after one loss, some of the players rather fondly recall, well, you may remember Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd was popular at that time. And the Cosmos players like to sing on the bus, "We don't need no indoor soccer," which was very much the opinion of some of the Cosmos there. Some feel that distracted the club. But as you can see, the Cosmos tried to promote themselves as the New York City team with that. When people think of the Cosmos, they often think of them as New Jersey. That's an important issue for us as historians. To what degree is it New Jersey history? To what degree is it New York history? The Cosmos played, of course, at Yankee Stadium in '71. And in '72, moved over to Hofstra, played at Randall's Island in '74, '75, back to Yankee Stadium in '76. But then the real explosion in '77 at Giant Stadium. But in '83-'84, there they were at the Garden. And it didn't generate the interest that they had hoped.
Dave?
Yes.
Didn't they also play at the Brendan Byrne Arena?
That's what I meant to say, is that their real home was the Brendan Byrne Arena.
Yeah, that's where they played.
But in '83-'84, they split some games with the Garden. This is the team in '84-'85. Those of you can recognize from the ball. They've shifted now to the MISL. You see the orange MISL ball. And there's Ray Klebecka, his brother was mentioned earlier, was brought back to try to bring some success indoor. A lot of my heroes in that picture. I really loved that team and enjoyed those games indoor. But I think there weren't too many people involved. They did put a real press on to try to win. Did go to the NASL indoor final the year before this and lost. They were swept by the San Diego Sockers, who are still playing and thriving. In the aftermath of I should allude to New Jersey Rockets played one season as well. But by 1985, the Cosmos suspended operations in the middle of the MISL season. They played their last game, the last competitive match, until the reboot in 2013. The Cosmos played against the Minnesota Strikers, again with our relocations. The Fort Lauderdale team had gone to Minnesota, and they won a game there, but then folded before the All-Star break. So Shep Messing tried to pick up the mantle. The New York Express, a lot of former Cosmos players. They even kind of lured Ricky Davis through some nefarious means away from St. Louis. As you can see here, this is very interesting in terms of English football history. Some very famous young Arsenal players actually appeared at Nassau Coliseum against the New York Express. Players like Tony Adams, Paul Merson, and Rocky Rocastle, and Michael Thomas, who scored that great goal, no offense, against Liverpool to win the league in '89. They were kind of cutting their teeth with Arsenal, and they were familiar with the indoor game from the winter tournaments that had been played in England. So when Arsenal came over, it was a version of the game that the Arsenal players were actually familiar with from the Budweiser tournaments in England. Although this was something that, I'm good friends with the club historian at Arsenal, and this was something that was pretty much forgotten. So a piece that I dug for the Times was also promoted by Arsenal. So this is kind of now something it was the first time Arsenal had ever come to the United States. And then I want to bring it up to the present day. Again, we thought with being in Baltimore, it would be nice to do a nod to the Blast. But I have to say, no offense, but I really hate the Baltimore Blast. I really do. And it was my great good fortune to be up in Utica to see the Utica City FC last December have their very first sellout against the Baltimore Blast, who they beat that day. As you can see, a really great crowd. And the point I'd like to kind of start wrapping it up with is that, yes, and again, this has been made a little bit, the indoor game is still being played. The major arena soccer league is thriving in different markets. Utica is one of those. Utica, this arena, as you can see, it very much resembles Madison Square Garden. When you walk in there, you almost feel like you're in a mini version of the Garden. Same architect. This was his trial before the current iteration of Madison Square Garden. So it has the same kind of suspension roof, and the crowds there are really quite amazing. There's 3,860 seats in this. So again, considerably smaller than Madison Square Garden. Last season, Utica averaged 3,414. So there's only a couple hundred empty seats any game. This season, they're doing even better, 3,585. So almost every game is a sellout there. So there is still a hunger for this game. Again, with the right tweaking, right modification, and the right amount of talent, there are more opportunities for professional players still, thanks to the indoor game. But I'd like to just end it off with a couple vanity pictures. Brian is even in this one picture. He's in the back of the room. The point I'm trying to make with this is that, and this goes back to the earlier thing, U.S. soccer history is everyone in this room. And I'm betting everyone in this room has played a game of indoor soccer, whether it's with walls or without. This is still how we play. It's part of our heritage. And it's almost, American soccer has always suffered from amnesia. And I think you see that as you go through these, oh, indoor soccer introduced in New York. A couple decades go by. Indoor soccer introduced in New York. Indoor soccer introduced in New York. Arguably, New York's best team is 3.5 hours up. In Utica right now, there is no pro soccer team in the New York metro area, but New York soccer is still thriving. Whether it's the Walls game at Chelsea Piers or a more futsal game as played often in the suburbs in the New York City area, this is part of our heritage, and it hasn't gone away. We're still playing indoor, and I'm just hoping that all of you will capture your own histories, your own personal histories and in your communities, and we can make sure that we include the very, very important role that indoor soccer continues to play in the U.S. game. And with that, thank you all.